live. Okay, and you all can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So for those of you who might be new coming on tonight, who didn't make it last night or maybe haven't seen the replay yet, I just want to introduce myself again, tell you what this workshop is about, what the intention of it is. We'll do a brief recap from last night because I'm sending out the replays so that you'll get a chance to watch it. And then we'll dive into what I want to cover tonight. And I just want to emphasize, if you're not seeing the replay or the email, just check your spam folder, because I put myself on the list to make sure I would get the reminders, and mine went to spam. My own emails went into my spam folder. So if that might be happening to you as well. Okay. So welcome, welcome. My name is Linda Downey. I am, oh, hey, Eileen.
Hi.
I love seeing faces that I know. It makes my heart so happy. Thank you. And it just, I'll finish my introduction in 1 second, but it just boosted my energy. And I was about to take responsibility for having low energy. I think I got dehydrated today. Like it's super hot and humid, and I was outside and I did a lot of sweating, and I was like, oh, I just kind of feel like, so I was going to take responsibility. But by seeing faces, Lisa, I went to high school with, Amy, Eileen, yep, Teresa is local to me. So Catherine Baker, is that also Kathy Baker from high school? She might also be from high school, or there could be another Catherine Baker in the world. But now I don't feel so dehydrated and deflated. So thank you. Yeah. So again, if you want to mute yourself once we get started, in case there's a lot of noise in your area, feel free to do that. And then just if you have a question, just let me know, raise your hand or something. So my name is Linda Downey, and my entire life I've been in health and wellness, master's in exercise physiology, and did a lot of work in more like fitness related in my earlier years. And then I really struggled with my own health issues a lot. My first autoimmune was diagnosed in my 20s. And I've had 4 diagnoses of autoimmune conditions, mostly around my thyroid. I had Graves' disease and Hashimoto's. So they're the 2 ends of the spectrum for thyroid. Ulcerative colitis, so lots of GI issues. I had Lyme disease, and I had some rosacea and chronic fatigue. So that's been my health journey. So as I was so passionate about health and wellness, and struggling, I kept looking for, what am I not getting? What am I missing? What's not being addressed? I went to all the traditional doctors. I was on prescriptions for my thyroid and stuff from my gut as well. And in my 40s, I went back to school and became a functional health practitioner. That also was very much tied to medical issues with my daughter. So my daughter passed away 4 years ago, and she had a lot of medical issues, and I wanted to understand more how I could help her. And in the course of that journey, I started to realize that stress, chronic stress, was a big part of my issues, but not only chronic stress in my current present life, but stuff that I had been holding for my entire life. Stuff that I had been holding from my childhood and had never really processed through or understood the impact of. And so I switched and continued to go back to school again, and have done a lot of training and spiritual work, and also work and trauma. And trauma doesn't have to be like major, terrible, abusive things, although plenty of people have had that. But trauma can be any event, any experience where we have a strong emotional reaction and there's a wounding as a result. So it could be pretty normal type of circumstances. So we'll get into that again in just a minute, but that's who I am. That's been my journey. And what I do now is I work with clients on overcoming the stress and the burnout and the health issues that are the result of holding that in their bodies. And then what we started to see even a little bit last night with our conversation with Teresa is it doesn't just impact your health. Our focus tonight is on health, but it impacts your joy and your life experience. It impacts how connected you feel, because there's a place where we disconnect when we have unprocessed trauma. In order to keep surviving, you kind of have to do that. So people oftentimes, like, their whole life have felt somewhat disconnected or unable to really like create joy and in their life and also in their relationships. It shows up, you know, if you're always stressed out, irritable, depressed, anxious, that's going to impact your relationships. So it's really all of that. But tonight's focus is going to be on the link between that and health and chronic health issues like I've had. Okay, so that's where you're at tonight. Did you think you were going somewhere else, like, I don't know, a fantasy football thing or something? Because you're in this. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's get started. Yesterday, we defined trauma, and this is not my personal definition. This is from the framework and the perspective of the training that I've had, some courses from Oxford Health Clinic, some courses with Dr. Gabor Mate, some courses with Dr. Alex Lloyd. So I'm calling from a few different places. Dr. James Gordon has a book called Transformation. He's also an expert on trauma. But even if they're slightly different, these different resources, it really is all the same perspective. So the perspective is, it's not the event that happens. It's not when somebody does something that's abusive or hurtful. Trauma is the wounding that happens in the body, in our emotional body, our mind body, how we think about ourselves, and the beliefs that we then create about ourselves and the world. So the trauma is really the wounding. And here's a couple of points to remember. Number one, we can heal. So from a lot of things you already have healed. And if you have healed, then it's not really a wounding anymore. You've healed, because a wound would still be painful, right? If you had a wound, if you fell and had a physical wound on your leg, when you touch it, it would be painful, and you would, guard yourself from that pain. That's what happens with trauma. So if there's still a wounding, it's still painful, but it can heal. And then the other part of that is, like any other wound or scar on your body, there's a place where growth stops, and there's a place where the tissue, right, on your physical body is more rigid. It doesn't have the same texture in your skin. So the same thing, the growth stops in your spiritual growth. There's a place where emotionally you kind of stay in development, wherever that wounding happened. So that's the definition that we're looking from when we're talking about trauma. What's still present, that still causes pain, that still blocks you, where there's a hardness or an inflexibility or a place where you separate from as a result of. Okay, any questions on that? I really love having people live. That's why if you got my email today, I said, if you come live, I have a bonus gift for you, because I do a lot of stuff all month long. That's just me in the camera, right? It's just me talking with my coffee mug, or I do a live a few times a week. But to have people here with me, that's why I like to do the workshops. So it's a conversation. So please feel free. If you have questions or you want to contribute something, I would love to hear it. But that's why I wanted to encourage you to come. So speaking of that, at the end of tonight, once I see everybody who's here, I'm going to give somebody a coaching session with me with an energy healing, which we'll talk more about that tomorrow in tomorrow's content. But I'll give somebody tonight one of those, and somebody tomorrow night, whoever comes live. And then if you can come both nights, I have something even bigger for somebody who makes it to both nights. So that was my way to get you here. So I'm not talking to myself. Okay. So thank you for being here. Okay. So that was a little bit of the recap. I'm just checking my notes. So we started to look at some of the common ways that people cope with trauma. So if you remember, if you weren't here last night, let me just bring it up. What we saw was that when an event happens and we experience that, and we have to find a way to navigate through that, or to feel safe, or to get love. So it could be the example that I gave last night. Hi, Emily. I see Emily there with her mom. It could be something as simple as you're in first grade or kindergarten, and you're walking up to the lunch table with your tray, and all the kids sort of block you out, so there's no space. So that's not like something that's really abusive. That happens in all of our lives. But if that child in that moment takes that as an impactful event that then changes how they think about themselves, like, I must not be likable, nobody likes me, something like that. So now that's where the trauma comes in, and the wounding. Or it could be something much more significant. I'm going to share with you something from my life. My dad, and I adore my dad, but he's often part of my stories because he was an alcoholic. And my mom died when I was 4. She was like 32. She had autoimmune conditions, and she had multiple sclerosis specifically. And my dad was an alcoholic. And we used to go to a babysitter's. I remember them. They lived across the street from my grammar school. We, meaning my older sister and I. And they were very nice. There was nothing wrong with them, but I didn't really love being there. And so this has got to be before I was 4, or maybe a little bit when I was 4, because my mother died 2 months before I turned 5. And so, and actually towards the end of her life, we got a live-in maid. So we stopped going to that babysitter. So maybe I'm 3. And I remember this. The babysitter said, your dad's not coming tonight. You're going to go to sleep here, and he'll come and get you in the morning. Probably now as a grown-up, what I realize is he probably had been drinking because he was an alcoholic, and he probably realized he's not coming to pick us up. He was doing his thing. But my 3-year-old self decided he doesn't love me enough to come get me. There's something wrong with me. That's what a child would interpret. So that's what I decided is I must not be lovable. And in fact, I made that even bigger to men leave me. Again, not like consciously in my 3-year-old, conscious brain, but the impact and how I felt. And so the way that I've been in my life ever since has been the expectation of men will leave me. And guess what? I'm always in relationships where they do. It's not a coincidence, okay? It's me showing up, and through my choices and through my behaviors with that as a core belief. So it was a core wounding. The wounding was I felt abandoned. The wounding causes the belief. And that's what's happening when we're little. When we're very little, we are creating our view of the world. We are taking in all the information and deciding how it goes for us. So core wounds will create core beliefs. So that was one of my core beliefs. So I'm just inviting you to look at your life. You don't have to share it out loud, but you could jot it down. What might be some core beliefs that you have? And we have them about everything. We have them about how lovable we are, how worthy we are. Teresa was so kind to be in a conversation with me last night and to talk about how a belief of hers is that she feels selfish, I think is what you said, right? I'm selfish if I don't say yes all the time to what other people need, right? So there was a belief about I'm selfish if I don't make everybody else's life work. We have beliefs about money, especially if we had scarcity and lack when we were very young. So we might have heard that from our parents. Money doesn't grow on trees. No, we can't afford that. Or we just might have a core belief around scarcity and lack from our own experiences. And that's going to color everything that you see about money and what's available to you. So we have core beliefs about everything. And they really got created very much tied to our core wounds, which happened when we had different trauma experiences. Okay. So I want you to keep those in mind, especially the big ones about yourself. I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy. You know, that was mine. I must not be lovable or my dad would come. And remember, it's safer as a child. So that was not abusive. He just didn't come pick us up. And he called ahead of time. It's not like I was left there standing on a corner or anything like that. But think of the times when somebody is in an abusive situation, even if it's just the grown-ups are yelling. Maybe they're fighting about money, which contributes to, oh, money's a problem. But they're fighting about anything, or there's anger, or they're saying, get out of my sight. I can't believe you did that. Go in your, I can't even look at you right now. Right? It's a lot safer to decide as a child, there must be something wrong with me. Let me decide that. Because if we decide there's something off or wrong or not okay with the person taking care of me, now I'm even more unsafe. Right? Now I rely on this grown-up. In fact, I love this grown-up. I've bonded to them in some way, and they're doing this to me. If I actually decide they're the problem, now my sense of safety is even more jeopardized. So it's safer for me to decide the problem's with me, and what do I need to do to cope? I better keep my mouth shut. I better not rock the boat. Let me be as perfect as I can so that they don't get more angry. Maybe mom's a single mom and she's working 2 jobs and it's just like, she's exhausted. Let me squash down what I need because I can see she already has too much. Whatever it is, those are the ways that we repress and shove down who we are. And that's where the disconnect comes from. That's in the spirit, which we'll talk tomorrow more about, that spiritual connection. So when we want to say no, but we say yes, when we figure out how to cope, when we have those wounds that create our beliefs, all of that is where the trauma shows up and continues to show up. Okay, so tonight I wanted to talk about the correlation with health. So as I told you, I've had my health challenges, which is what drove me to keep looking, keep going to school, because I am so committed and passionate about wellness and health. And I felt so crappy most of my adult life. And I had reasons that I could make it seem like, well, of course I feel exhausted because I have a daughter in the hospital. Or of course I feel, I have fatigue. And absolutely those things, those current present situations did contribute. But I had stuff, my ulcerative colitis was when I was 21. I think I told you guys that last night. So stuff was showing up long before I had children. So that's what drove me. And I'm actually really thankful for that, because that's what drove me to keep looking. Did you ever hear of somebody who said they have cancer and it was the best thing that ever happened to them was the cancer diagnosis? That's how I feel about all of it, because if life had been good enough, I would have done good enough and been doing something else. But instead, I get to do this and I love this. So, but this is the journey that got me where I am. So in terms of health, all right, I want to first share with you that there are leading health institutions, leading medical institutions in our country right now that are doing a ton of research on the relationship between stress and chronic health issues and energy, which tomorrow we'll talk more about energy. But Stanford University, Harvard, University of California, San Diego specifically is doing a lot of research data collecting for Dr. Joe Dispenza. If you've ever heard of him, he does a lot of retreats and he collects data from people, like swabs out their inside of their cheek. He takes stool samples, he takes blood, and he collects that, and he continues to work with them in alternative ways to have them release these kinds of emotions that are stuck, the unworthiness, the unlovability, and he tracks them over a year. And the University of California at San Diego is collecting the data and, tracking all the people. He's done, I think it's been going on for 7 years now that they've actually been doing the data collection. So they have a lot of information on thousands of people and how their health has changed. Southwestern University, HeartMath Institute, which is not a university, but they're an organization in California that's for the past 70 years, the leading researcher on stress, non-education researcher. So these are all the institutions that are really committed to looking at, and I'm sure there's more, but these are the big ones. Dr. Bruce Lipton, you can just raise your hand. Have you ever heard of Dr. Bruce Lipton? Dr. Bruce Lipton is probably in his 80s now. He's retired. He was on the faculty at Stanford. He's a cellular biologist. He wrote The Biology of Belief, if you're interested in some resources. Cellular biologist, was on the faculty of the medical school, and what he was seeing in his research, and this is going back, he's in his 80s now, so this is going back 30, 40 years, he was seeing how cells changed and genetic triggers, like turning a gene on. If you have the gene for multiple sclerosis, if you have the gene for breast cancer, genes could be turned on or turned off depending on the environment that the cell was in. So he was a cellular biologist. The environment that the cell was in is determined by our thoughts and emotions. Because when we think and feel something, it triggers a biochemical reaction. It triggers our hormones. If I'm having the experience of love right now, I just gave birth and you put my baby in my hands, or I'm just decided I'm totally in love with this guy, oxytocin is pumping through my body, right? Oxytocin is the love hormone for bonding, for feeling good. Serotonin is the hormone for peace and calm. So if I'm, out by the ocean and it's a beautiful evening and it's been a great day and I'm feeling peaceful, serotonin is going through the body. Dopamine is the hormone for like excitement, really like happy, excited. Cortisol is the hormone for stress. It makes us get up and live our life, but it's also the thing that gets produced when we're afraid, when we're angry, when we feel confrontational, like that. So the cells are always in a biochemical soup, like a crock pot. What are you putting in your crock pot and what's cooking all day? That depends on what you're thinking and feeling, and that's going to turn on or shut off the genetic triggers in your body. Okay, so that's what these institutions, and Dr. Bruce Lipton, he really, again, The Biology of Belief is a great book. He goes into the science of it. Dr. Ben Johnson has passed away, but he was an oncologist, and he was part of the work and the training that I did with Dr. Alex Lloyd, who's a psychologist. Together, they did a lot of work on health and the psychology of health. And Dr. Ben Johnson, who I think there's a current one, so if you Google him, just do oncologist. There's a young Dr. Ben Johnson who's something else. But this guy was an oncologist, and he said, I have never seen a cancer patient who did not have an anger issue. Doesn't mean they're angry every day, like road rage people. It could mean they repress their anger. They don't allow themselves to feel their anger. So that was Dr. Bruce Johnson. So there's an emerging field now called psychoneuroimmunology. It's all one word, psychoneuroimmunology. And it looks at the connection between psychology, what we're thinking. Every time you have a thought, an emotion is stimulated. Every time an emotion is stimulated, your endocrine system, your hormones respond. Right? So psycho is your thoughts. Neuro is the nervous system, your fight or flight, your nervous system telling your heart rate to go up, your blood pressure to go up, all of that. Immunology, your immune system. psychoneuroimmunology and the connection. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But it really looks at the unity of emotions and the physiology. Emotions and physiology, not only as we're developing, so that's happening when you're a day old, when even in utero, there's emotions and you're processing things at a very different level than when you're 20, but you are a month old, 6 months old, 2 years old. So even through development, that's happening and it's affecting the immune system. I'm pretty sure I said last night, when you have an autoimmune condition, the root cause of that started years before any symptom ever shows up in the body. And I learned that through my own journey. And I think I shared with you ulcerative colitis in my early 20s. That is an autoimmune condition. Because of the alcoholism and the volatility in my childhood home, I used to get a stomach ache at 2 p.m. because I knew I had to go home in an hour and I didn't want to. In 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. That's why colitis, by the time I'm 22, colitis shows up. That's a chronic inflammation in the gut, right? Anything itis is inflammation. If you've had any health issues and you've done any reading around health, you know, you can see it all the time. Inflammation is a major root cause of all health issues. Inflammation in the brain, Alzheimer's, inflammation in the cardiovascular system, inflammation in the joints and muscles, you know, all the arthritises. When you're stressed, part of the stress response, whether it's emotional stress or you cut yourself. So if I were to cut myself with a knife, that would be stress. It's a physical stress, right? But what happens? You'd see it get red, it would get hot, because the body, the immune system would immediately send all kinds of cells there to make sure it doesn't get infected, to start to heal the tissue, right? So there's an inflammatory response, and you look and you watch when you cut yourself to make sure if it stays red, oh, that's not good. Maybe it's getting infected because the immune system is still pumping out what's making it stay hot. Or if you see red streaks, right? So that inflammation is purposeful. That's for a physical injury. In an emotional injury or stress, right? You're just upset, you're afraid, you're angry, or you've been holding stress your whole life since childhood. The whole time, your immune system is saying there's a threat somewhere. We're going to send out cells somewhere, and it's pumping out inflammatory cells, cytokines. That's their job. So you're in a chronic state of inflammation. People do everything with their diet. Okay, I can't have inflammation. Let me change my diet. Let me do alkaline water. Let me do non-inflammatory foods and cut out gluten and dairy. And you'll get some results to a certain degree, but if you don't look at the stress in your emotional and mental body and what you're holding, the inflammation stays. Does that make sense? Okay. So what else do I want to tell you? I want to give you some other examples. In the Journal of Medicine, a man named Noel B. Hirschfield, he was from the University of Calgary. He talked about psychoneuroimmunology and how this was the new way to really advance science into how we treat medicine. What's happened in our Western culture is there's a dualism. It's like somebody took a knife and cut in half. Here's the physical body. You go to these doctors and they'll figure out your physical body. They'll cut something out, or they'll give you a prescription to handle what's not functioning. And over here are your emotions and your thoughts, and we're going to separate them. But you can't separate something that is one being. We're one being. We're not 2 different things or 3 different things. So that's where, we've really fallen through the cracks, but there's people who are recognizing that. And that's what I'm trying to give you the examples of. What I think it was Dr. Hirschfield said is the immune system does not exist in isolation from your daily experiences. The immune system's job every day, it's responding to any invaders, and it's doing that based on information from your nervous system, which is your fight or flight. Your nervous system is like the CEO of the company, right? If you looked at your body as a company, let's say there's two general managers in charge. One guy, his name is John. John's in charge when the company's going well, when everything's running smoothly, there's no problems in the facilities, the roof's not leaking, the plumbing's good, and business is good. John's in charge when everything's good. Frank is in charge when something goes wrong. Oh my God, whoop, 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 warning, we have a leak in the, a leak in the ceiling, or business is down, we just got a whole shipment of bad stuff, whatever. Then Frank takes over. As soon as that emergency is handled, the leak is fixed, or we get the inventory replaced, it's supposed to go back to John. What happens when you're chronically stressed and when you've been holding trauma since you're little, it never goes back to John. Frank stays in charge. And when Frank is in charge, you know what he does? He says to all the departments, shut down production, stop doing the work. We need to handle this emergency. Digestive system, stop digesting your food. You're still eating every day, but stop digesting because we need your resources to go to this problem. Immune system, stop going after viruses and bacteria. We need your resources for this problem. Endocrine system, stop trying to balance the hormones. Everybody just shut down. That's what happens. And Frank, I got to look at which hand I did. Frank stays in charge. But Frank's not supposed to be in charge. We're supposed to go back to business as usual. But most people, and it feels very normal, especially if you grew up with trauma in your childhood, it feels normal to repress your emotions. It feels normal to say yes when you want to say no. It feels normal to take on more than you're really capable of. There's a barrel theory, which says we all have a barrel that can handle so much stress. Once we go over the top, and it could be something very little, but if it's over the top, it's over the top. If your barrel was full, you go over the top, now you've got problems. Most of us are so used to living with the barrel overflowing all the time. But it's not even like there's terrible things happening. It's everyday things like feeling obligated, feeling guilty, being a perfectionist, trying to control everything that happens. It's those things. That's all putting you over your barrel. Okay? In the 1960s, Dr. David Kissen, K-I-S-S-E-N, he was a British surgeon, a British thoracic surgeon, and he started to collect data on particularly men with lung cancer. So he said that patients with lung cancer tend to bottle up emotions. He did a study and found that cancer was 5 times higher in men who did not have an appropriate emotional response. They didn't know how to process their emotions. Okay. He even went so far as to say, and this illustration really drove it home for me. Smoking does not cause cancer. This is a long chest surgeon. Smoking does not cause cancer. Sure, if you smoke, you're going to have a higher likelihood, but saying smoking causes cancer is the same thing as saying a body of water causes drowning. A body of water doesn't cause drowning. If you know what you're doing when you jump in the water and you know how to swim, you're not going to drown. Now, is it more likely that you're going to drown when you're in a body of water than if you're on dry land? Yeah, right? Otherwise, if you never go in the ocean, you might drown in your tub. You might drown if you drink something too fast and it goes down the wrong windpipe and it gets in your lungs or something. I mean, there's other ways, but obviously staying out of a deep body of water will lower your chances. So not smoking will lower your chances, but the smoking isn't the problem. It's the state of the immune system that has been holding repressed emotions throughout a lifetime. That's why, do you ever see these stories all the time where you'll see like grandma's 102, what's her secret? I don't know, I smoked my whole life, I drank my whole life. Like, okay, how did she get away with it, right? Because she's been loving life, doing her thing, not making herself feel bad. It's not, so people go, oh, I guess I should go out and start smoking. It's just that the smoking didn't harm her because she was managing all the other systems of her body. Okay. All right, let's look at how the body works. And then I want to get into another little exercise with you guys. The thymus gland. The thymus gland is right here under the breastbone. The thymus gland is the master gland of your immune system. So the thymus, the purpose of the thymus is I think it's in charge of like 1,400 different chemicals. It tells the immune system, send cytokines out, send these kinds of cells, T cells, B cells, whatever it needs. Okay, stop the inflammation. That's what the thymus is doing. It's not coincidence. God knew what he was doing when he made the design, that the thymus is right where your heart is. When we allow our emotions and we live through our heart, there's a lot of energy there. And that thymus is, the gland is receiving the energy of the heart. When we block our emotions and we guard our heart and we don't allow ourselves to feel, because by the way, if you block anger, you're also blocking the good emotions. You can't block some and not block all to some degree. So if we're blocking energy going here, then that blocks the energy that the thymus receives to manage the immune system. So that's one place to look and see. There's really physiologically or anatomy-wise, anatomy is where it's located, connection between heart is the center for emotions, heart and immune system. Now let's also look at the immune system is like the border or the boundary for things coming into the body. So the immune system's job is to say, nope, your virus, your bacteria, your virus, you can't come in, or you're in, I'm going to attack you and kill you, right? That's the job. I'm going to protect the body that I'm in. Anger has the same job. It's not a tangible anatomy thing, it's an emotion thing. But anger, the job of anger is to say, nope, you're in my space. Nope, you don't get to do that. Appropriately expressed anger is a way of making sure we're okay. It's a boundary. Animals, think of any of them, like think of a gorilla or even a bear, whatever. What do when they're like, when you're coming in their territory? The first thing they do is express anger, stand up, make themselves big, get out. Hopefully you pay attention and you don't invade their space, and then everybody's good. If you don't pay attention and you go into their space, now we might have a problem. But even animals know, let me express anger, let me show you signs, let me express it, and then hopefully we'll avert a problem. So anger has the same job as the immune system. When we repress anger, we repress the immune system. How does that sound for you guys? Mm-hmm. Okay. If you have a question, I want to know. If you're like, I don't get it, please speak up. Okay. All right. So that was the next correlation that I wanted to do. Now, the immune system and autoimmune. Amy, you got, okay, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I mean, that all made sense. The one thing that I had a question about is when you talked about the emotions being in your heart, but they're actually in your brain, right? That's where the centers from the emotions are.
Well, you have a thought, but the emotions get produced in the endocrine system. So the physical place they reside is the endocrine system, but the feeling, and I don't mean your heart pump, I mean your heart center, emotions and feeling, which is really part of your spiritual self, that happens in your heart center and in your body. And your heart center is also where you store your subconscious memories. So that's all in that same place.
Store your memories in your heart.
Your heart center. Your heart center is like it's like your spiritual place. It's where your spirit resides. So when I have a memory, or even if I don't remember, but I did remember, let's say my father not picking me up when I was 3. That memory, I do have it up here in I can recall it in my brain, but it also lives in my heart center, in my spirit, which is where the subconscious belief of I'm not lovable also resides.
Okay, so not in your heart physically, but in...
No, not your heart pump, but the heart center. And tomorrow we'll talk more about the energy centers, but your heart is one of 7 energy centers that all have a related endocrine, biochemical, nervous component to them. But it's like where energy is being used and stored and sent. But the heart center in particular is the place of your spiritual home. It's the place where we create our life from, and it's the place where our emotions reside.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So back to autoimmune and disconnecting from self, which is the tie-in to trauma. So as we saw last night, and I recapped a little bit tonight, is the trauma, when we make that decision about ourselves, when we decide, I guess what I was thinking and feeling is not as important, like learning the word no, and then the parent says, don't you tell me no, or whatever, we start to see, okay, what I think and feel is not valid or not as important or whatever. That's when we start to separate from self, right? When you have autoimmune conditions, that's when the immune system is no longer recognizing the body it's protecting. So it's not maybe certain tissues, like for me, it was my thyroid. With rheumatoid arthritis, it's in your joints, right? Whatever it is, scleroderma, it's the skin. Multiple sclerosis, it's the nerves. Some people say Alzheimer's is a neurological autoimmune. So when the immune system is not recognizing the body it's protecting, that's the physical manifestation of emotionally not connecting to self. So emotions like, wait, well, let me just make sure I said all that. So the immune, here's how Dr. Gabor said it, Gabor Mate. The immune system perfectly mirrors the unconscious psychological confusion of self to non-self. When we don't honor ourselves, when we had to learn to cope as a child and we keep doing that, there's a confusion between what my spirit tells me I want and need, what my internal guidance tells me, and then what I think I'm supposed to do in the world, what I'm supposed to do to make other people happy. There's a disconnect. The immune system is the perfect mirror of that. So one is a physical manifestation, the other is in the psychology and the emotions, but they're doing the same thing. And emotions like fear, love, and anger are all critical for our survival. Fear keeps you safe. When you recognize something's there to be afraid of, oh, let me not go put my hand on that stove, because you learn you get burned, right? Fear keeps us safe. Anger provides the protection of the boundaries. Love makes us feel nurtured, allows us to develop, and creates the survival of the species, right? So those emotions are all critical for us to develop and survive. But we're afraid of fear and anger. And we talked about this a little bit last night. Mostly women have learned certain emotions are bad. I don't want to feel that, or I've learned that my emotions are bad. I'm going to repress them. And now, we see the problems unfold. So what else do I want to say about any other questions about just the connection between your health? In Chinese medicine, which has been around way longer than Western medicine with pretty great results, they recognize that each organ of the body is related to certain emotions. So the lungs are related to grief. When you're holding grief, when you've had tremendous grief and you haven't allowed yourself to process through it, sometimes people take on the identity of grief, like, I could take on the identity of I'm a mother who's lost a child. I don't. That's one thing that's happened to me in my life, and it doesn't diminish how much I love my daughter, but I don't take that on. Or a widow. Somebody could take on being a widow or being an orphan, whatever it is. You can create your identity around it, and that's going to keep it as part of you. So grief is in the lungs. People with respiratory issues, if you wanted to look and see, or a Chinese medicine practitioner would look to see what are they holding around grief. Liver is anger. And I mentioned that last night. The job of the liver is to get rid of toxins, move out what we don't need in the body anymore. That's not coincidence. When you're holding anger, yes, it's appropriate. Yes, we need it. But if we hold it in, it becomes toxic. And that's going to affect liver function. Kidneys is fear. I don't know Chinese medicine to any great degree, but I know that if you looked even further at I just kicked a dog. If you looked even further at the spleen and the stomach and all of the organs, there is a correlation. Those are the biggies. Obviously, heart is love, but the cardiovascular system and issues in the cardiovascular system is fear. Because when you're afraid, you stay in hyped up adrenaline, your blood pressure stays up, the heart rate keeps beating, right? Okay, so what I wanted to talk about tonight was just looking at your emotional styles. Again, everybody has things that happen to us. It's what we're interested in is what's still affecting me today? What did I develop as a result of? So when we need to cope with this situation, when dad isn't picking us up and we have to survive that, which feels very unsurvivable to a 3-year-old, or something else, or even things when you're older, it's not always when you're little, but when you're little is when you're developing, when you're creating your whole sense of the world. If we develop certain patterns of our emotional styles, that's what we carry through. And if we keep carrying them through, we keep re-traumatizing ourselves. So Let's look at those. First of all, you want to realize that what does every child need? Love and to feel safe. That's what we need in order to develop. So the more we're held and nurtured and feel love and feel safety, the more we can go through experiences without getting super wounded. But if something happens and we have to cope, right? It's always around love and safety that's going to have the biggest impact. Safety occurs in your body. You have to feel safe. You can't think yourself safe. You can't tell yourself you're safe when your body's not feeling safe. It's not going to work. So you've got to get used to, what do I feel, and feeling it in your body. That's a lot of the work I do with my clients, is the feeling part and the somatic work. So there's 6 different emotional styles, and I'm just going to, and you're just going to write these down, and this is just an opportunity for you to sort of look and see, where do I fall into? So the first one is avoidance and distraction. Avoidance and distraction, that's someone who keeps themselves really, really busy, someone who doesn't give themselves time to feel, is always focusing on others' needs or on, chores around the house, never any downtime. Even if they're watching TV, they're up doing stuff, very, very busy, always working, always has a radio on in the background or the TV. So very uncomfortable with just being present, with just being quiet and stillness. There's no time to stop and have space for themselves because they're not comfortable with that. And the way, or the reason that gets developed, is because there's a lack of safety when they were young. There was just a lack of safety. It didn't ever feel safe, so they just had to always avoid. Or they might be very sensitive, so they feel things a lot. So, and it can become too much. So they just have to keep themselves busy. So you want to look at what's in the background of somebody who's always staying busy. Now, all of these, it's not like they're inherently bad or anything like that. And we might do any or all of them at some time. It's when you're doing it all the time, that's your only way of coping. Okay, I just want to make that distinction. It's your way of coping, and you don't ever know how to get out of it. That's going to keep your body re-traumatized, right? Okay, the second way of emotion, the second emotional style, I should say, is a state change, meaning you need external tools to change your state. So your emotional state. I'm wound up, I'm exhausted, I'm frustrated. What are my external tools? Could be sex, could be alcohol, could be food, could be shopping in the middle of the night on QVC or something like that. Anything that you need in order to make yourself feel differently, because you don't know how to do it yourself. You don't know how to say, what am I feeling right now? Let me feel that. Let me move through it. And I'm just going to let you know that there's probably going to be folks hopping on because I have an 8 o'clock client call. I thought I'd be done in an hour, but we're not going to be. So faces are going to hop on, and I'll just tell them to hang out with us. Okay. All right. That comes from emotions that are too strong to process. So people need something external, or it comes from an absence of emotion. If you're so used to shutting it down and numbing, then you need something in order to feel something.
Linda,
So-
is
yeah.
that the type of person who has an unhealthy relationship with food?
Mhm. That would definitely contribute to that, because you're looking for food as the thing to make yourself feel better. So food instead of alcohol, food instead of
Mhm.
drugs or cigarettes.
Mhm.
For some people it's sex, whether it's sex, or masturbate, whatever it is, like
Mhm.
something that I need to go do so I can feel better now. Sometimes that person is very intellectual, which the next one is as well, but not in touch emotionally. The third one is an analysis type of style. That's someone who's always intellectualizing. I can learn about it. I can get the concept up here, but they don't integrate into their body. So if you ask them, what are you feeling? They would describe, well, I'm thinking blah, blah, blah. No, what are you feeling? But they don't know how to get to the word because they don't really know how they're feeling. They just know what they think about it. You know what I'm saying? So that's like an analyzer. That's someone who maybe grew up in an environment that really valued intellect, did a lot of talking and intellectualizing about a lot of things, but didn't value as much emotions, pretty stoic. That was my dad, which is why I think he was an alcoholic. My dad was a professor of mechanical engineering at NJIT. So very, engineering, science, we got a love of learning and all of that. We had a lot of intellectual conversations, not so great at cracking a smile or a tear. Had to have a drink, started early in the morning, drinking a cigarette. I remember Saturday mornings, 9 o'clock, shot and a cigarette.
Mine was after 5 o'clock and all day Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is blaming, an emotional style of blaming. This is someone who's going to say, they made me blank. They made me feel guilty. They made me whatever. Hey, Judith. They made me, it's usually feel guilty. So that type of style is going to justify how they feel by somebody else's behavior. So they don't take responsibility for their own emotions.
Oops. My hand.
Hey, Judith, we're just finishing it. Stay with us. This is the end of, no worries. Did you just realize I don't recognize these faces?
Yeah.
So Judith actually has been a client of mine. She's gone through my foundations program. She's currently in my Thursday night program, which is a spiritually based. So this is the workshop. I know you've been away this week or whatever, or last week. So I've been doing this workshop on trauma, health, and spirituality, connection to soul. So, let's see, what else was I going to say about the blaming style? Feelings, they grew up in a household where feelings were not really allowed. So when they felt something, they knew it was like either shameful or not allowed. So they had to put it on somebody else. The next one is an empath. That's someone who takes on other people's feelings a lot. It could be their way of coping and not dealing with their own. So if I keep myself busy with your feelings, or what are you feeling, or what do you need, or what are you feeling, I don't really have to look at my own. And then they'll say, well, I'm an empath. I'm so exhausted because I take on everything from everybody else. Well, it's actually a coping style in order to avoid your own. And you may, somebody may be more sensitive than others, but it's a way of coping. So it's a way of creating safety. And here's Onbreen too. So if there wasn't a lot of space for their feelings growing up, hey, Onbreen, we're just finishing a workshop. I'm running over, but hang out, stay. Sorry, I told you clients are going to start popping on. Okay. So if there wasn't a lot of space for your own feelings, then it was easier to take on and be concerned with and pay attention to other people's. And now you just, continue to do that. And then the last style is somatic. That's someone who represses their feelings, and then the emotions get stored in the physical body because they have to go somewhere. The energy, when you have an emotion, something happens to you, and you have an emotion of anger or fear, even rage, Emotion is energy in motion, emotion. That's what it is. If you suppress it, that anger, that energy is got to go somewhere. It'll go into your physical tissues. It'll get stored in the physical body. So when somebody has a lot of physical pain, and they do all the things, they go to the PT, they go to the orthopedist, they've done this, they've done that, but they just can't really get away from the pain. First of all, there's chronic inflammation, which is going to cause pain, right, from that stress response. And then also that unexpressed emotion is being held in the tissues. That person also learns that feelings are not safe, or their feelings are too big to process. So chronic headaches, chronic pain in the joints, hips, your hips are the foundation of your body. So hips are going to be a place where if you're disconnected to self, hip pain, leg pain. So that might be Lori also coming on. Is that you, Lori?
Yes, me, Linda.
Hi. Okay, I'm just letting you know. So I'm finishing up a workshop as you guys just stay on with us. We'll be finished in a few minutes.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. So what I wanted to give you was a tool that you can use. Did everybody see themselves in one of those 6 styles? Okay. And again, you know, different places might have variations, but pretty much that's like an accepted model of coping mechanisms that, again, none of them are necessarily bad, but it's when we're stuck in them. So you might do any one of them. You know, if you're like, come home and you had an exhausted day and you're like, oh my God, just give me a glass of wine. And you do that every so often, it's not a big deal. But if you need wine every night in order to get out of your day, it's not the same thing, right? So what you want to do, here comes Rhonda. What you want to do, hey Rhonda, we're just finishing up a workshop. Stay on with us, please. You want to get into your body, because remember what I said is you can't process emotions, or you can't feel safe by thinking. You're not going to feel safe in your head. You're going to feel safe in how you feel. So you want to start to get used to connecting to your body and getting out of your head. So this is just an easy meaning, doesn't take a lot of time. It's also not threatening. Just get into your body on a regular basis. And you can do that by going through your 5 senses. So you can say, what am I smelling right now? What do I smell? I smell what I cooked for dinner. I smell the Brussels sprouts. I smell my dog. Like if you really get present, right? You go through each sense. I like to close my eyes so that because the eyes can take in, you know, they'll make everything else work less. So I'll close my eyes and just go to my eyes last or something like that. But what do I feel on my skin? I feel the straps of these pulling on my shoulders. I feel the vent of the air on my feet. I feel, you know, what this fabric feels like. What can I taste? What do I taste in my mouth? What I ate last? So go through your 5 senses. It will start to get you into your body. Now there's a lot more to go to get to emotions, but you start to feel safe in your body. And that's really important, to be able to feel emotions. It'll also get you out of anxiety. It'll get you out of your head. If you're having anxious thoughts, you want to pull your energy down into your body. But that's an easy place to start. And then if that feels fine and comfortable as you do that, you could start to say, what else do I feel in my body? I feel some tension. Maybe I'm feeling sadness. Where do I feel that? But you don't have to start with that. Just start to get into your body. That was one tool I just wanted to give you today. So any questions on any of that? Ladies who are coming on for, you know, my client call, thank you for your patience. We're just finishing up, and These are all folks who are in this workshop on the trauma, health, spiritual connection. So thank you for your patience. Do you guys, anybody else have any questions? Was it helpful? Okay, good. So what I'm going to do is, as I said, I'm going to pick one of you guys from tonight, and then again tomorrow I'll pick somebody else, and I'll reach out to you and just say, hey, if you'd like it, I'd like to gift you a call, and we'll do some energy healing work based on what you say on the call and what you'd like to do. So I'd like to do that as a thank you for being here live. So I'll reach out to you, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. I know it's Friday night in July, so if I don't see you, have a good weekend, but I hope I do.
Thank you, Linda. It was great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Linda. Nice to see you.
Okay.
you.
You too. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Enjoy your next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Let me see. I got to stop recording.